Right, so thank you everybody for joining us for our Summer Service Supervisor Training Series. This is the second of the series. This one is all about work plans. If you have any questions throughout, again, just please enter them into the chat box. Feel free to unmute yourselves and to ask. We're more than welcome to field any questions that you might have that's about work plans or anything else related to a summer internship or summer AmeriCorps member or positions that you might have. So happy to kind of work through any issues that you might have. With us today is I am Justin Ellis. I'm the Director of Development at Iowa Minnesota Campus Compact, and we also have Kara, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kara Treble-Smith and I'm the Program Manager for Community Impact. I am based out of Cedar Rapids here in Iowa.
Thanks, Kara, and it should be noted that we're both working at home right now, as I'm sure several of you are as well. So if a little person happens to bust through one of our doors and comes in asking for more Cheerios, you'll know why that is. So bear with us as we enjoy the splendors of working at home with our lovely children. So who is Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact? Well, our mission is to strengthen the capacity of colleges and universities to prepare all students to become engaged citizens. And our vision is through our strength of our coalition, our member campuses across both states, Campus Compact, we provide leadership for the civic mission of higher education. And we serve the states of Iowa and Minnesota. We might have some folks who are from Illinois who work with Illinois Campus Compact through their Tyson program on this call. Illinois Campus Compact partners with Iowa Minnesota Campus Compact to deliver the Tyson program. There's some positions that are in the Chicago area, and then we also have some positions that are in the Northwest Iowa area. So that's why we're all kind of joining together on today's call. This is, as I mentioned earlier, part 2 of our 4-part supervisor training series. We had the previous one that was on recruitment, and that one is recorded, and we're getting that up on the website. So if you didn't get to see it and you want to watch it, that should be available to you. And then we have 2 that are coming up. Next one is planning and intentional orientation, which does relate a lot to creating a work plan. And that is on April 8th at 3 p.m. It's online as well. And then we have being an effective supervisor, effective supervision. That's on the 24th at 10 a.m. as well. And everything that you're seeing today is being recorded. So the whole supervisor training series. And we also have last year's supervisors training series as well. That's recorded on our YouTube site. So if you want to watch these or you want to watch last year's, you're more than welcome to do both of those. So what's the purpose of today's webinar? We really want to improve your knowledge on how you can develop a meaningful experience for your summer intern or AmeriCorps member that really achieves better results and happier people. Work plans are great. We use them at Iowa Minnesota Campus Compact. They're great ways to kind of structure what an orientation looks like and what a person's work levels look like throughout the year. And we're going to kind of dive into what that looks like in a little bit more detail. And I'll also say pretty broadly for our summer service series, this is something we started last year and we saw a lot of success with. We think that by sites implementing some of the best practices that we've come to learn over the years, that you can really achieve better results and have happier people. And so that's why we're doing this. We want you to be as successful as we've been able to do with our own programs and our own staffing and volunteer opportunities. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to dive into what is a work plan and work plan structure. Kara did send out an email that does have the Workplan Template as part of that. So if you got a chance to fill that out, that's great. If you didn't get a chance to fill that out, we're going to walk through that today so that way you have a good idea of what everything is in there and how you can fill that out to make a meaningful experience for your intern or AmeriCorps member. So we'll walk through that, walk through creating a work plan, and then we've got a special assessment tool that we'll share with you, so that way you can kind of go back and look and think, am I doing what I want with this particular work plan? And it poses some questions and gets to a little bit more nuanced things that that you can kind of look and evaluate. Is the work plan doing exactly what you want it to do? So building off of the last part of our series, work plans and recruitment, If you didn't attend the the recruitment webinar, that's okay too. But one of the things that we want to pose for everybody, and feel free to unmute yourselves and say it, or you can put it in the chat box. But what is your primary goal of this position? It might be to achieve some great outcomes for your clients or your beneficiaries, but it might also be that you want to connect with somebody from a particular campus. You might want to have somebody who's around college aged in your office and can provide fresh new ideas. Kara, what are some of the other kind of common things that you've seen uh, for reasons why individuals want to have interns or AmeriCorps members in their offices?
Yeah, I definitely think just having a college student perspective, a young person's perspective, we hear a lot, but then also a pipeline. So helping people understand what the positions in your office might look like, or in that field or particular industry might look like, and then be able to kind of recruit more people and more, a better workforce is also something that we see a lot. And so sometimes it's not necessarily a specific job description that needs to get done. It's sort of we just want the people. We want good people to come in and learn about what we do and be a part of that. And so the job description can kind of change based on who the college student is and who you find.
Yeah, it's so essential, and to really think about that, not just what do you want to have happen in terms of what are the kind of check boxes to get done over the summer, but also maybe there's a larger strategy that's behind it that you're trying to accomplish, and just recognizing those things and how can you really shape this position to help you do those things effectively. So if you do want to share any of that with us, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat box, and we can revisit it throughout. But we'll kind of move on with everything. So we've got creating a work plan, which is the big step here. So we're going to kind of dive into all the components of it. So this is the work plan structure that we propose, and this is what we use. And you can modify this however you want. It says Tyson on it. So for those of you who are part of the Tyson program, that's familiar to you. If you're not part of the Tyson program, we kind of developed this to put it out to an external audience through that program, and then after that we expanded it to our other programs that we work with. But this is the work plan template that we think is pretty effective. This main sections here are, you have your objectives, action steps, metrics, timeline, and then you also have the goals, and then you also have the broad timeline listed at the top, as well as the employee work plan section of it too. So the goals, what are those? Those are kind of the overarching things that you're trying to accomplish. They're pretty broad. They're not really, they don't have like a specific way to measure them necessarily, but they are kind of things that you're trying to do, like make happier people or make improve the health of individuals. Those are pretty broad goals. There's not really an easy way to measure them or anything like that. Objectives are subsets of goals. They're a little bit more specific. You can kind of think of them as, something that can be measured or can be closely measured. So it's kind of the next step down from there. Action steps are the kind of the actual activities that are going to happen, that the person is going to do to get from point A to point B. And one thing I'll say about action steps is that you don't want them to be too prescriptive. You do want a little bit of flexibility within there. But if you do have certain processes or policies that you have to follow, you want to highlight that here as well. Metrics, just how you're going to measure it in terms of it being completed or the needle being moved in any way. And then timeline, when is this going to happen? Pretty generally, that can be specific, that can be broad. Kind of depends on how you want to roll this thing out, and the understanding of the flexibility of the objective or project. So to talk a little bit more about goals, we'll dive into each one of these pretty well in depth. As I mentioned, they're broad, but they're also achievable for your intern or member to work toward. They should be specific enough to provide direction, but broad enough to have several objectives and action steps. So one goal that we put it as an example here is support existing and developing new networking and training opportunities. So it's pretty broad, but you can have a good sense of when you're going to be there and when you're going to be done. Objectives, they support your goal, And they really break down what you want your intern or your AmeriCorps position to accomplish during their employment. They're broader than action steps, but they are more specific than goals. So, and certainly you can have as many objectives as you want for each goal. Um, I usually think around 2 to 3 objectives for a goal makes sense, but you might have more, you might have less than that. It kind of depends on the scope of what you want your intern to do, and really how long they're going to be working on working with you, and also working on whatever project it is that you have going on. So one objective that we wrote based upon the goal that we had before is coordinate 3 regional recognition events. So well, I'll go back to the last one. Remember the goal is just to support existing and developing new networking and training opportunities. One thing we want to accomplish within that is to create these regional recognition events. Action steps. So this is really where we kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of it. They are specific items that need to be completed for the objective to be met. This usually means that several action steps must be met for your intern or your AmeriCorps member to meet their objective. And they should be very detailed as they really do describe the specific task for your intern or AmeriCorps member to complete. Action steps can be independent from each other, so you can do more than one thing at the same time, but they always have to be connected back to that objective. And so the example that we had for our objective before was to coordinate the regional events. And one example action step here is really, analyzing and evaluation results and write a report on the event successes, challenges, and recommendations for improvement. So after the events that happened, you want to go back and reflect and think about, what happened, what went really well, what am I going to change for next time, and then report that out to whoever it is that might be doing this next year or who's ultimately responsible for those recognition events. In the metrics area, this is kind of the accountability piece of it. It really lets the intern or AmeriCorps member know when the step is complete. And they should be very specific, and you don't want them to be independent from the timeline, action step, objective, and goal. They all have to kind of logically connect. And so our example here is, you report the finalized and present your findings to the program coordinator and executive director. So if you remember, the action step was to really reflect on the events and write that report. Well, the metric is that you finished the report and you shared it with the staff. The timeline for this. So this is that last part of the timeline. It really connects directly with each of the previous steps. And the timeline should tell your intern, your AmeriCorps member, at the very least, the action steps deadline. So that might be kind of a range. It might be a specific date, especially if you have a specific deadline, like an external deadline that's attached to this particular action step. You want to keep that in mind. And then if your project is complex, then you may also wish to add like a start date to it. So it's, you need to do this between this date and this date. If you don't have a start or a deadline is uncertain, then, giving a range is certainly acceptable. Really, this is just providing guidance of like, when should you be focused on this? When should this be due? Or when should this be a priority for you? So an example timeline could be completed within the first 2 weeks. So this is what everything kind of looks like together. You can kind of see, we have our goals supporting existing, developing new networking training opportunities. Then we have the objective of coordinating the recognition events. And then we have some specific action steps with metrics and timeline. And those are really just meant to kind of chunk it out, make sure that the person understands what they need to do and when they need to complete everything that's within it. So that's all that we have for the kind of example work plan section of it. Does anybody have any questions about just the structure of what a work plan looks like, what all the sections mean, and how you would possibly fill one out? Kind of open it up to the floor right now. You can put it in your chat box, or you can certainly unmute yourself. Either is okay. All right, I'm not seeing anything, but if you do, feel free to let us know, and we're definitely eager to answer your questions. So, assessing your work plan. What does this part of it mean? So I'm going to switch over to our assessment rubric that we have. to give you that sense of things. Pull it up here. Oh, never mind. Kara put it in there. I forgot about that. Thanks, Kara.
Sorry, I forgot to note that.
You told me that, and then I forgot. So this is the assessment rubric. This is something that we had developed a few years ago as just a way to go back and to think about the reflection or reflect on what you'd actually put together. So the attributes of this, and Carol, I'll kind of run through this, and if you want to dive a little bit more deeply on some of these topics, feel free to chime in on things. But we have them kind of broken out to, you know, what are the attributes of your work plan, thinking about that pretty broadly. And then we have, would you consider it to be exceptional, acceptable, or does it need improvement? Oh, we have a question in the chat box here. I'm new to supervising this program. How closely are members expected to follow this work plan? If a new one comes up that matches the member's role, can it be modified? That's a great question. So if I'm not sure what program are you in Tyson or are you in
Summer Vista?
Okay, Vista. Good.
Yep.
So with Vista, you would put together the work plan, and certainly if things need to be modified as time went on, you're definitely welcome to modify that as things kind of progress. If things are substantially different, and this is true across all of our programs, but if things are substantially different than what you proposed in your application, then we would expect you to communicate that with us so that way we can review it for allowability is what we're looking for. And I will say that we are in very interesting times right now with the coronavirus. So if anybody on the line is in a situation where you're thinking, you know what, we might need to change our response based upon the pandemic that we're going through, you certainly are welcome to reach out to us and have that conversation. So don't feel like you can't do that and you can't modify what your application was. You know, we're in very interesting times right now, and we want to be responsive to your needs. So, but they're going back to the slide here. We have the attributes, exceptional, acceptable, and needs improvement. And one thing I'll say pretty broadly is, you know, we provide this guidance to you, but this is really kind of a values and give and take. So you might be looking at this and your alignment with organizational goals section is kind of in the acceptable or needs improvement part of it. And you might be okay with that. And that might just be what you need out of that position, going back to what we talked at the very beginning. But you might also think about the values and things you're trying to get out of the position, and you might want to move it towards you know, the exceptional phase. So kind of keep that in mind as you use this tool, is that this is a tool to give you an opportunity to think about, are you getting what you want out of this position? So Kara, do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about this and how it's kind of applied? And you have a ton of experience working with students, so anything you can have, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think sort of one of our goals with the work plan is really just to offer some clarity for the members and for the students. These are primarily college students, and that's who I'm familiar working with. And we know that when students come in, you know, we definitely want to approach our work with students, you know, from an asset-based perspective and assume that they have the ability to do certain things, but also don't want to over assume knowledge or experiences. And so being clear about what we are hoping for from them, what we're looking for, and then being open to sort of honest conversations about, are you prepared to do this work? What additional support do you need in order to accomplish that, et cetera. Work plans help with that conversation and sort of help put the member in the driver's seat too, to ask questions and to ask for additional support. I just wanted to throw this in because I was just reading Brene Brown in her Daring Leadership book, and she talked about clear is kind and unclear is unkind. And I feel like that's the perfect sort of little line for why we try to encourage doing these work plans, so that students can come in and know what's expected of them and feel like they're set up for success. We also know that that actually is also in line with what we know how to set up students from historically marginalized backgrounds for success also, that structure is a good thing, and being clear about what you're looking for does help folks who may have different background experiences feel like they are welcome and ready for the position. So those are just a couple things to note. Some common challenges that come up when trying to figure out work plans for members and interns. It can be difficult to sort of know what you can expect. And so it's also good to just have some flexibility in that. I always feel like it's sort of helpful to have your prioritized projects, 1 or 2 big projects that you know need to get done, and make sure that's known. But then, maybe consider having something on the back burner. Some students come in and just are like very high performers and can knock some things out. And so good to have something on the back burner, but also not too many projects so that, you get overwhelmed or can't succeed. And then that kind of goes the same for figuring out, offering enough detail so that it's clear, but also not so much that the student doesn't have leeway to get a job done in their own way or to problem solve, which we know are good skills to have also, and people kind of have different ways of getting things done. And that's not necessarily an easy line to find, or, we're kind of just dancing in this gray area, which we do for all of our staff members. I don't think, this isn't different for students, but just something to kind of consider and to have conversations about that, both with your member and maybe your team, other people on your team who might be working with them. And I guess it's just, something that I always like to think about when it comes to students. There's a lot of research out there that shows when expectations are set at an appropriately high level, more than likely they're going to meet them. So keep that in mind. You can set high expectations, and with the right support in place, they generally will rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. We did an evaluation of our summer program from last year, and that was one of the key findings of it, was that if you as a host site place your intern or your member in a position where they have some autonomy and their own decision making to it, they own the project and the activities for it, and that leads to a higher quality result in terms of the project or program being operated or maintained. And one of the things we also learned about it was that we had an increase of about, on average, of 30% across all of our sites of new beneficiaries being served during the summertime. And I have no doubt that those 2 things are linked, although the study really didn't go that way. But putting the students in that driver's seat really does a lot.
Yeah, and I guess also I was going to mention I like the way that the metrics are set up in this work plan template, because I think I used to think about metrics differently and think of it as it has to be like a certain output, I guess, when you're thinking about measurable goals. And when in this case, I think it's more about sort of indicating what done is, and that is also a helpful way for students to know if they are being successful or not, or if they're accomplishing what you're asking them to, because it's sort of the when is this done, which I think is a different way of thinking about metrics than I had prior, at least. So, and it's been helpful.
Awesome, thanks, Kara. Does anybody have any questions about the metric or any of the things that we've talked about and up to this point? Happy to answer questions if you put them in the chat box or anything like that. All right, you will receive a copy of this, and certainly links to this slide, as well as the other handout that we have. So you can definitely use that to review your work plan as well. All right, so we have a couple of reminders here, but I wanted to reach out. So Kara, do we have any example work plans or anything that you wanted to walk through right now?
We did not get any. So
Okay.
I was just going to say that I will, I'm happy to look at any. I also think just showing it to, as I mentioned, like colleagues is also can be helpful, but feel free to pass any along if you have questions about it or are unsure, and we can also share with other folks. We can kind of bring people together and talk about it too if you have an interest in doing that, trying to figure out what's an appropriate level of work or not, if you are new to this type of experience. But yeah, feel free to share, and we can offer some support and resources.
Got one question here in the chat box. Do we ever turn in our work plans to you at all. It's just a tool for us to remember. Yeah, we don't require that you turn them into us. It's not any sort of document that we're requiring. You certainly are welcome to send them to us, and we'll review them and kind of give you our feedback on if we think it's pretty clear and understandable. That's our whole purpose. Kind of going back to the whole purpose of this series is really just to help equip you with tools, experiences, and knowledge, so that way you can ensure that you have a really productive summer and have happier people who are in your AmeriCorps internship position. So I'll kind of talk about some of our reminders here that we have coming up. So our next training is planning an intentional orientation. One thing I will say is make sure in your orientation plans that you do talk about the work plan. And then also when you have the work plan, use that to create your orientation. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about in the orientation section of this. And then our next one after that is effective supervision. So if you want to rewatch this one or see any of the other trainings that we have in our series, you can find those online. We'll be posting them on our Facebook feed, as well as we'll be posting them on YouTube as well. So there'll be lots of opportunities for you to be able to go back and reflect and think about some of the trainings that we have here today. So that's the last one, but I'm going to go back up to our pictures so you can see our contact. Oh, I thought our emails were on that one. I'll put mine in the chat box. So if you need to contact us, if you want to send us a sample work plan, you are more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, I'll stay on for another couple minutes. If anybody has any questions, you are welcome to put them in the chat box, unmute yourself. We're happy to talk about anything that you might have questions on. I'm going to stop recording this.